it just in the last 10 years or so, it does seem like there's just a major shift that people are thinking differently. People want to apply their theology. People want to see Christian schools, Christian government, Christian this, Christian that, and people want to fight. And I think, I don't know, in God's providence, I think that's sometimes what it takes. I think we had just I don't know, a bunch of spoiled children. It seems like we just had like the some generation, I don't know what generation, but some generation, the sin of Eli, we just had these spoiled sons that just were lethargic because they had all these provisions that America
Oh yeah,
gave
yeah.
to us, and now all of a sudden, like, COVID made a bunch of people think, right? Doug Wilson said it like this: we all had to learn in 15 minutes what we should have been studying over the past 15 years, about God and government and all this, and but it
All
made a
right.
lot of guys, myself included, like, oh my goodness, I don't have a Christian worldview that encompasses these kinds of situations. And it was all ethereal and all theoretical, and not a big deal until the last couple years, especially. Now everyone's like, yeah, I want to think about what vaccine I get. I want to think about who I vote for. I want to think about this, think about that, and so now everybody is like, the Bible actually does have an answer to these things. And the guys who still want to insist, because some guys, they are going to get left behind because they refuse to budge. But the guys who still want to insist that this, pietism, this, privatized lordship of Christ, he's not Lord of all. He's just Lord of your sweet little heart. And it's, and it's private, and, he's going to return soon. And Christ doesn't really have any desire to get involved in worldly affairs. I really do think like that brand of Christianity is quickly becoming obsolete. People are just
Yeah,
not interested.
look, there have always been gatekeepers. These
Right.
seminaries are gatekeepers. You can't minister unless you've gone to you've gone to seminary, and there really aren't that many gatekeepers anymore.
Right.
If you want to know something today, you can go online and find an answer to it, or find a group that years ago you couldn't do. Look, when I was in high school, I graduated from high school in 1968. I never heard the gospel. No one ever talked about any of that. When Jimmy Carter ran for president and he used the phrase "born again," the media didn't have any idea what that meant.
Hmm.
Billy Graham had to write a book called "How to Be Born Again" in order to try to explain all this stuff. So we are so far behind, and we capitulated. Look, public schools when I was growing up, they were okay at prayer, and they had a Bible verse here and there, but nothing was taught from a biblical worldview. But I remember sitting down with a high school friend I hadn't seen in, I don't know, 40 years. Went back to Pittsburgh, and I told him, gave him my testimony. He said, "Oh, Gary, we were all Christians back then. We were all Christians. That's because you went to church. Although two doors down there was a Jewish fellow who, we forgot about him,
Hmm.
but his worldview was our worldview. Had the same moral. Everybody in the neighborhood pretty much believed in the same way, and for the most part raised their kids in the same way, because there was a spillover effect. There was kind of a Christian civil religion that still existed,
Hmm.
but that changed. That changed rapidly. Changed rapidly. World War II changed the moral center uh, of of the United States. It changed everything. We didn't see it right away, but it did.
Can you
People
explain that
began
a
to.
little bit? Yeah. Flesh that out. World War II.
Well, here we fight World War One. It didn't last long before we're fighting World War II again. And what people saw over there, these soldiers came back. My father was he was in World War II. Was at um, um, Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. He was in the Pacific in World War II. He was in the Korean War. Had his right leg blown off in the Korean War. And these men came back, and they saw horror. And the question was, where was God in all this? Same thing happened in Europe, where the Jews, 6 million Jews killed. Where was God in all this? People began to question the very core of their existence by what they had seen and what they had experienced. And it was slow. There was still there's still the Christian remnant there a bit, but people began to, I think, move on with their lives because they had lost the moral center of things. And the Christian churches were weak. They didn't talk about these things. I mean, Billy Graham comes out in the 1950s, and there was Fulton J. Sheen, who was Roman Catholic, who was on TV, but they weren't really dealing with the issues of the day in a transformational way. We were sending all of our kids to public schools. We just thought they were great. We were growing up. We played football, cheerleading, all that kind of thing. And secularism creeped up on us to the point where it grabbed a hold of us. And then, of course, pastors weren't preaching the whole counsel of God. And so politically, what happened was there wasn't that much of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. A Democrat, a Kennedy Democrat, would be considered a fairly conservative Republican today. Right. The Republicans today are almost worthless. Christians give up. In 1980, we won the election. In 1984, Christians just thought, boy, we just changed the world. Well, we didn't. We just won a couple of wars. And then it was like they gave up. They just went right back to where they were before. It's like 9/11. All that happened. And, it's amazing how we've forgotten, we didn't see that as maybe a warning from God that we better get our act together with all of this. So God has given us enough warnings here. I hope more and more Christians take heed. Maybe they are. Maybe they're getting a little more fed up. Maybe they need to understand that government, we just don't switch sides and we take the same money that they're taking and spend it for our pet projects. So a lot of teaching has to take place, and unfortunately, a lot of pastors aren't prepared for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It seems like each generation always has to learn why. You can pass down the what. This is what we do, but they need to learn the why. They need to have the worldview. They can't just hang certain virtues in midair. There has to be a foundation for that, understanding the underpinnings. And it seems like, I don't know, it just, one generation, I forget who said this. It might have been D.A. Carson back in the day, but one generation believes the gospel, and the next generation assumes the gospel. The next generation neglects the gospel, and the next generation rejects the gospel. Yeah. And and I think that illustration can apply beyond just the gospel. But for me, I can't look back at Reagan, and I can't, I providentially wasn't born at that time. But what I can see, I was a part of Acts 29 network for a while, and then left, and wanted to be confessionally reformed. And I kind of got, I got sick of Acts 29 for a number of reasons. But the biggest one was Acts 29. In my assessment, just always wanted to be cool. They wanted to be cool in one way with Driscoll. And then they said, hey, we repent of wanting to be cool and we don't want to be cool anymore. But really, they just tried to start that just Driscoll, that thing wasn't cool in the culture's eyes anymore. So it's not that they actually repented of the approval of man and the desire to be cool. They recognized that society was condemning Driscoll. Driscoll was cool for a while. He was cool in Seattle, but then when that started being condemned as chauvinistic and all those kind of things, then all of a sudden, with greater and greater emphasis on feminism and all these, then it was like, oh yeah, holiness and gentleness and these kind, and so, but then quickly out of that came racial reconciliation, and I remember like 6 years in a row, every conference that racial reconciliation, and they'd have a panel, and everybody get up there and it was all anecdotal, and just stories of being pulled over by a police officer and mistreated and these kinds of things. And so eventually, I was like, I didn't even have the language for it at the time. I didn't know about critical race theory. I didn't know, any of these things. But I was like, I'm tired of, like, how many times do I have to repent of a sin that I'm not even aware that I'm committing, the sin of corporate racism.
See, that's your problem. See, you're not aware of it, so it makes you
exactly right.
Racist by definition. See, it's all mixed up in this. But see, what ends up happening is what Christians don't. A lot of these guys who have these ministries and so forth, they don't like the particulars. They don't want to have to make the hard choices. They don't want to have to tell people, you don't. Why are you sending your children to government schools? Why are you doing that? Well, our school's different. And I remember talking to some Christian leader. This was a number of years ago, and he said, "Well, our school's different." And I said, "Tim, do you
Everyone
know
says it.
that the other people are saying that about their schools?
Right.
Their schools are different, but you're saying their schools are terrible, and they're saying your schools are terrible." He eventually, changed. He said, I don't know because of what I said, but and look what's happened to government schools.
Right.
I mean,
And so
we think, they think we took prayer and Bible reading out of the schools in the 1960s, 1962 and 63. We took that out, and that's what changed. No, it changed a long time before that. If you're just sprinkling a little bit of pixie dust Bible stuff in the school, and you're not teaching everything from a Christian perspective,
right,
you're not teaching a Christian worldview, and you're turning your children over to the people who are trying to destroy you.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. We have a lot of Christians who don't have a Christian worldview, and then all of a sudden, as secularism took over, then the world just started calling a spade a spade. So it's like they had already, secularism had already gotten its fangs in, and the actual meat of Christianity and a Christian worldview was moved out, but then there's still the remnants of the Christian pixie dust, like you're saying, to sedate the Christians, to let the actual meat of it, the actual worldview get taken, the teeth of Christianity get taken. But here's some pixie dust, so we're not actually really taking this thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, they prayed before the football game. Oh, okay, it's not that.
That's a victory.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then
we have a moment of silence.
And then
given us a moment of silence.
Right, exactly. A moment, yeah.
Victory.
But then once it's all gone, then eventually you don't do the pixie dust anymore because you don't have to. You can just call it what it is. Yeah, this is a public school. What makes you think it's Christian?
Whoever would have thought that Eastern Europe is more Christian than the United States? The fact that Eastern Europe would come out of communism. I mean, Hungary, the president of, I don't know if he's prime minister or president of Hungary, is a staunch Reformed Christian. And you're beginning to see the Eastern Europe, who they've learned about the past and they don't want to go back there.
Right.
You've got sub-Saharan Africa where the gospel is spreading, and we think America is kind of the breadbasket of evangelicalism, but no, in Central South America now, the types of Christianity that are going on down there are pretty weak. Right. But there are people down there trying to transform it. I have a good friend in Guatemala that's trying to transform it. I got someone in Chile that's trying to transform it as well. All over the world, these little things are raised, being raised up. And you've got Eastern Europe countries, resisting the flow of Muslims into their country.
Right.
The European Union is trying to punish them for that. But this, they're not giving up. So
wait, real quick before you go, do me a favor, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the bell so you'll be notified with all our new content as it comes out on a daily basis. And if you're willing to support this ministry, you can do so by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Thanks so much. God bless.